Thank you very much. So a little bit of flattery first. I don't usually present to audiences full of people who understand this technology all that well. Can I ask for a little bit of show of hands for people who, so I know there's a good section here of people who understand this technology very well. How many of you are comfortable with your understanding of blockchain, how it works, the internals, what it's all about? So there's a very high level of people. How many don't? So, okay. You know what? I think let's press on with my original plan. I will give the talk that I usually give, explaining a little bit about what blockchain's all about and who we are as the digital catapult, where we stand, and what our plans are for blockchain in this space. So I hope that at the end of this, everyone has a good, equal understanding of this so conversations can move forward more swiftly. Right. We exist as a neutral convening organisation, sort of glue in the economic machine of the UK. Catapult centres were set up about 5 years ago by the then Cameron government to try to accelerate specific economic sectors that were lagging behind other nations. So there's a cell and gene science catapult, there's a satellite applications catapult, offshore renewables energy, there's about 10 of us. We're the digital guys, which makes our role a little bit harder because it's not a fixed industry vertical. So instead we look specifically at manufacturing, construction as well, and the creative sector. And we look to get the cutting edge technologies that are out there in 5G and low-powered wireless networks, in Internet of Things, in artificial intelligence, machine learning, in virtual reality, immersive systems, and in blockchain, into these sectors. So I am the blockchain guy at the Catapult. So I hope that explains a little bit of what we are. We're mostly government funded, but we also have to win competitive grants along with collaborating parties, and a little bit of our work's commercially funded. So we're there as that neutral party that tries to wrap big fluffy arms around people and make sure everything's going to be okay. So let's go into what DLT, distributed ledger, is all about, and why I use DLT as a term rather than blockchain for specific reasons. It's a little fluffy at the moment. So let's take ourselves away from here to a nice warm country with a lake full of fish and villages that have grown up around this lake. And over time, the villagers start to fish the fish from that lake, and they fish it to emptiness. And eventually the villagers themselves die off, and the whole ecosystem collapses. This is a very classic economics 101 idea of tragedy of the commons. There's a common good which only they could exploit it appropriately and proportionately could benefit everyone equally. So if instead you had a system of local government around the lake that detected and performed local polls and surveys on how many people needed fish that day, how many fish were in the lake, and dished them out proportionately, made sure it was all fair for every player, perhaps this could be a sustainable ongoing ecosystem. And that's where distributed ledger comes in. We are talking about addressing tragedy of the commons situations. And to get a little political, we're talking in a way about digital socialism. This is about creating an even playing field for many parties to then rethink the structure of their capitalist verticals on top of this socialist playing field. Okay, I'll let that one just dwell in the back of the mind for a little while. So what is a distributed ledger? Well, let's start with what a ledger is. A ledger is a recording of what's happened, the state of play, what's actually going on between parties. And we can distribute that, and we can connect it using this crazy new technology called the internet. And we can make sure that when a message is passed from one party, it gets recorded on another party's ledger, so that they are all maintained in complete synchrony with each other. So now, I don't have to ask you what's in your database. I check my database and know that its contents are identical to yours, and that they cannot be forged, replaced, rewound, or otherwise tampered with. So we have a system of databases or ledgers with very high availability because they are always up, and if one falls down, you've always got multiple peers to reserve you that data. The records are continually synchronized within, certain scope. And they are secure against reversal, intrusion, hacking, whatever you want to call it. And this gives you a complete history of the data within the ledger, and that's where you build your trust from. You don't trust it because it's a blockchain, you trust it because it cannot be tampered with, and you can see the entire history of activity on the ledger in front of you that is an exact copy of the ledger in front of your business partners. So what's inside a distributed ledger? Right, well, we've got these synchronized distributed copies. We've got a system for passing messages between peers that has to be standardized. You do have to standardize your messaging process. You have signatures that cannot be hacked, and you have a consensus protocol. And this is sort of a stack-based view of a distributed ledger. These are the components that go into making a distributed ledger. The very bottom, we've got, the internet, the networking layer. You have databasing technologies, and different blockchains have preferred different databases. You've got Monero with LMDB, you've got Berkeley DB in use by Bitcoin, you've got, actually, I don't know what's used in Hyperledger Fabric. Someone here will know, I'm sure. The consensus protocol, the virtual machine, the applications you build on top of a blockchain that are distributed applications, or dApps, and then the users who are eventually going to use that entire stack. This is the area I think it's most interesting, the consensus protocols. And we've heard a lot from Marta at the Hyperledger Foundation about all these different blockchain systems that they're releasing. And in those, some of them use one type of consensus protocol. We heard that Fabric uses Kafka, but there's now Istanbul BFT. You've heard of Burrow, which uses Tendermint consensus, and so forth. The virtual machine, you'll have read a lot of EVM. What that means is the Ethereum virtual machine, which means it's compatible with Ethereum opcodes. So you can code something up that would be able to run on the Ethereum open world system, and that would also be able to run on Burrow or Sawtooth if they had the EVM implemented. So this is kind of why I use DLT rather than blockchain. To me, blockchain implies one specific flavor of distributed ledger. And the key decision that you have to make as an organization or a company is, who are you playing the consensus game with? Who do you need to agree with? Do you want to agree with people you already know and have relationships with but need to build further trust into those relationships? Or do you need to come to consensus with parties you don't know on the other side of the world, wherever? And that determines your selection of consensus algorithm. So what's very interesting about the world of blockchain is that whilst blockchain was invented with Bitcoin in 2009, consensus protocols date way back to the mid-80s, where Leslie Lamport came out with the idea of the Paxos distributed system. And what happened was all the energy and excitement in Bitcoin transforming the world for finance led to the creation of Ethereum, which was going to transform the world for everything in distributed computing. And that energy got reinvested into those older style systems. So we now see your hyperledgers and the like. Okay. There's this final version here, metastable consensus, which appeared from Team Rocket in Cornell last year. This is Emin Gunseira's Avalanche paper. He proposes it as a third prototypical consensus mechanism. So in reality, there's really only 3 consensus processes out there. So what do we do as a public sector organization? Well, classical Quango. We say, well, look, let's see what the current state of play is in the UK. Who's out there? Who's doing what? And then we can maybe try to develop some interventions in the marketplace that will try to grow it and grow the UK as the place to do blockchain business. So we published this market mapping report back in November last year, had a launch of it. It's available through our website, although the navigation on our website, we don't promote blockchain as heavily as we promote our other areas because it is our most, is our newest area. So what we want to do was to build connections with the market. everyone out there, and we want to develop future programs to help the market grow. And so over 3 months, we identified nearly 270 companies in the UK. So these are not, sorry for Oracle, these are not the large multinationals, these are the small SMEs doing blockchain in the UK. We conducted 45 detailed interviews with founders or C-suite in these companies to gather their stage of development, how they got invested, what their focal areas are, where they see the problems in the market that's stopping them from growing. And so we think that there are 4 major subsectors to the UK's distributed ledger market. Down the bottom, you've got the companies building blockchains or building distributed ledgers. So this is companies like Monax. We didn't include IOTA because actually that's a German company, even though they do now have a presence here in the UK. But there's about 30 companies out there building blockchains. There's about 90 companies out there building dApps, distributed applications that are going to sit on top of someone else's blockchain. So these are the people working on Hyperledger Fabric stuff without modifying Hyperledger itself. We also see about 90 companies out there servicing these sectors of the industry. So these are specialist marketing teams, these are specialist news organizations, legal advice, banking services, code for hire contractors. And then on the side, we've got about 40 token exchanges, coin exchanges, the cryptocurrency side, the pure cryptocurrency side, that at the moment we're not so interested in because of the regulatory uncertainty around this space. So we found that most DLT companies in the UK naturally are still growing. It's a young sector. About 10% seem to have more than 50 employees. So actually some companies have grown very quickly to a significant size. They seem to have come from being traditionally funded, either from founders' money, now that could have been cryptocurrency boom, or it could have been from being a traditional business person who's then gotten into distributed ledger because they saw the benefit of it. Fewer than 6% had raised funds from an ICO, so despite the massive buzz around it last year, it's actually not as prominent as we would imagine. And nearly a quarter were saying that they weren't seeking investment at the time we interviewed them. 75% of the companies we interviewed were comfortable that they had a product ready to demonstrate, they just couldn't get it into anyone's hands. And the only sector that was really talking to them was the finance sector. Probably because Bitcoin itself was built as a primary challenger to the traditional finance industry. So banks had to get their heads around it the quickest of anyone. And now we're all playing catch up. So the early indications were that regulatory uncertainty was inhibiting growth, and banking issues. When you tell your bank, I'm doing a blockchain business, it seems that some banks will just shut the door in your face and close your accounts. So we think that the UK has the potential to become a leader in distributed ledger technologies. We know that the UK is quite an inventive country, but there's little engagement here at present. And we've heard a lot of great potential use cases for this technology in the construction sector, but it extends into multiple parts of our economy. So rewarding creators, tracking intellectual property, securely tracking critical national infrastructure and the like. So what we're proposing out to industry is let's actually start working on connecting you to people. Let's connect some of the energy and the inventiveness in these small companies to the needs of larger companies that want to dip their toes into the blockchain distributed ledger waters. Let's identify the correct problems that blockchain can solve. It's a great idea to think that you can move your entire global supply chain onto a blockchain and save 5% off your bottom line. Is it realistic? No, it's not. It's a bit too fantastical. We need to take sensible, measured steps to achieve that future. And the way we're going to do it is by convincing people this technology actually works, it actually does what we promise it does, and that there are good governance methodologies around implementing it within your business, about building the consortia that you need to become consensus relevant partners, about choosing who's a validating node, who's just an observing node, and so forth. These things are still to be decided by the community and discovered by the community. So, a DLT field lab is what we're giving the name to this, the lab because it's quite experimental. And what we want to do is identify sectors, so let's say construction, and to create a field lab where we have multiple collaborating parties, breaking down through a series of workshops to a core digital thread that we can turn into a distributed system, and then getting that converted into a DApp or a blockchain-based solution, and then trying it in the real world and comparing it against traditional practice, and saying, actually, should we have just used a database, or did blockchain really make a transformational change in our business practice? So we have kicked one off in construction. We had the likes of Coste and Skanska, HS2, Tarmac, Jacobs, Atos, and who else was in the room? 4 small blockchain companies. We managed to break down to 2 ideas that we think are straightforward enough to implement as a prototypical system, put back out into the workplace, and make sure that this actually does work. But we're also looking at building this in independent films and smart ports. Unfortunately, ports have Brexit on the brain at the moment, so they are dealing, with that. So once that's all passed, I think we'll hopefully re-engage with the ports industry and start to talk to them about how to do all this. You'll notice cheeky little Phil Hammond in the corner there, because field labs were mentioned in the UK's national budget as a way that the government's hoping that we can explore the value of blockchain for the UK. So if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask, and I'll be around a little while after as well.
Any questions?
Hello, I'm Laura Carrara-Cagney. The way, this is all very convincing, the way blockchain can help business and the reliability of the sort of conservation of data. What I'm not convinced at all is that somebody is inputting information. How is that verified? Before, if I have it only, say, on my computer or on our server, whether it's true, reliable, or right information doesn't really matter to the rest of the world. But if I input that into a blockchain, then it has to be true. Who's saying this is true, reliable, or right?
So there's a number of issues with, there's a number of points in what you've said. The first of all, I would contest the idea that someone putting fake information into database using traditional practice doesn't matter. So the second one, computers don't care about the truth of the data. They never have, they never will. What blockchain allows you to do instead is to track liability. Who put the data in, when they put it in, and maybe a little bit of metadata about the conditions under which they put it in. Now, what you choose to do with that tracking of liability is a legalistic or business process question.
Okay.
You sounded a little bit sceptical about certain blockchain applications. And I agree that 95% of them can use traditional databases. What are the use cases of blockchain that you're genuinely excited about, that you think, like the easy wins in the next 1 to 2 years?
Oh, the easy wins is a tough one, because actually we're asking industry to help, for us to work together to define those easy wins. I think the easy win part's the tough one. It's where you have multiple, the classic game of multiple competing interests. The creative sector may be an early winner, not in film, not in music, because you've got too many entrenched middlemen who are rent-seeking on the entire economy and don't want to give up their positions of power. Instead, in novel sectors or small sectors like independent film, you may see some really good, powerful ways of giving people back ownership of their intellectual property or finding new partners to collaborate with. So in the emerging virtual game market as well, tracking unique 3D models to drop into your game, but provide micro payments or micro attributions to the person who created the model for you. And you could adapt those ideas into construction as well. So the Forge platform, something like this could be a future idea. I think born digital, those are going to be the bits to transition first, and then paper-based processes are going to follow a little later.
I think a related question, Erwin here. Publish a kind of decision tree or checklist or something that allows organizations that want to get into this technology to actually figure out whether this is a useful use case or this is just another database.
So it's a very good point. So the World Economic Forum has a good flow diagram to help you make some decisions in this space. What we're hoping to do at the end of field labs, or actually through running field labs, is to provide market reports back to industry, so that because one of the most common questions we get is, well, who else has done it? Point to another blockchain. Show me that this is going to work for me. You're absolutely right. There needs to be more market intelligence out there and decision trees, and we are creating those through this process, but we don't have any yet.
Okay.
What's the duration of these labs?
So the idea is its initial, so it is a commercial offering out to industry. What we're saying to large companies is we want a consortium. So this isn't just one player paying and then getting something built for them, because a one-party blockchain is a database. Instead, we want 4 or 5 players contributing up to £120,000 for a year. And in that year, we will get the smaller teams in to help you break apart your idea, find the actual thread, develop it, test it in the real world. So that's the commercial offering around this. So it's project management.